War is expanding in every corner of the world. It isn't just the Middle East. Let's look at these two things. Obama begins the third Iraq war, and a Russian general actually calls for nuclear war. Let's get into it right away. Fears for hostages. Obama unveils IS strategy. It's referring to the Islamic State. And, previously he was very reserved on what he wanted to do with Iraq. He said, let's just leave it alone for now. But of course, he did this to seem like he was being very calm and careful. However, the strategy has always been to begin the third Iraq war. At the very top, it says, we are going to systematically degrade their capabilities. We're going to shrink their territory they control, and ultimately we're going to defeat them. Sounds a lot like every other war they get themselves into, which continues to expand rather than shrink. Chancellor George Osborne said the UK reserves the right to take action. And they said that, there is a direct threat to British security. So, of course, they're able to use the military. Quite interesting here because, it's not the parliament that needs to be used. It's not the Congress that needs to be used. Those are just ceremonial. The emperors can use them as they please, use the militaries as they please, of course. Now, you can read this here. There's a lot of information in here, but I need to move on very quickly. Obama to set out plan to go on offensive against Islamic State. Now, he was basically going to wait until Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken, to reveal what the plans are. So we need to wait for this detail. However, we know specifically that they will be setting off all sorts of bombs. I believe there's already 130 airstrikes that took place, and that's not enough, of course, because until there's boots on the ground, they're not satisfied. Let's get into this. Activists believe they have seen the Predator drone hovering for more than 2 hours over the city, and that is quite interesting. You could see it right there. Apparently it's not armed, but specifically that it will be, and what the Predator drones have always done in all these countries is cause so much havoc. But of course, it is nothing but an expansion. Now let's get into the Ukraine and Russia situation here. Russia hardens military thinking as NATO fizzes over Ukraine. And what I need to move on very quickly into this. Russian general calls for preemptive nuclear strike doctrine against NATO. You could see that right there in the image. Basically, this Russian general calling for an actually word for word, which I'll read for you, really against NATO, against the US. Now, this is brand new information. Russian strategic bombers near Canada practice cruise missile strikes on the US. So let's get into this right away. I'll read it briefly. 2 Russian strategic bombers conducted practice cruise missiles attacks on the United States during a training mission last week. Defense officials say appeared timed as a NATO summit in Wales. This is quite interesting. They're actually practicing for this specifically, and you could see what they said. I'll just scroll down very quickly. And the Russian general last week called for Moscow to change its doctrine to include preemptive nuclear strikes on the United States and NATO. What an amazing sight to see, to hear this actually being said by the Russian general, by Moscow, and this is obviously going to bring an escalation to what's happening right now. Now, what is happening, to keep this with the money, GPS, Russia's Gazprom to fall under the new EU capital ban. They are imposing these sanctions upon Russia, and they're trying to squeeze the life out of them, and apparently Gazprom is going to have to fall under that category, and this is going to bring big mess for the future. We'll see where this goes. This is from my book, and what I'm discussing here is if the flow of oil is disturbed anywhere in the world of the major suppliers, you have a increase in the price of it. Now, it's pretty obvious how that works. You could see that happen historically many times before. But the fact remains is that this will cause a recession very quickly, and it's quite the opposite of what the world needs right now, because of course the real economic indicators, not the stock market, are really dependent on cheap oil, and it continues to go up in price. Gasoline prices continue to go up, and that's obviously a huge issue. We don't need this right now. We need some restoration of our society, and it is looking like it's going the complete opposite direction. We need to de-escalate the war propaganda. Please give me a thumbs up on this video if you found it informative, and don't forget to become an insider. That's the best place to get all the intel, and it's free, and that is at themoneygps.com. You scroll down to the bottom, you fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.